told me that we have a quorum. And I want to confirm that we sent out a press release.
Yes, I was
All
notified,
right.
yes.
If we could go around the room and maybe start up at your end. Is that Molly?
Molly.
And if everybody would just introduce themselves, please.
I'm Molly Tate, and I'm the Director of Communications at KHC.
I'm Olivia McCallan. I'm the Public Affairs Director for the Home Builders Association of Kentucky.
I'm Logan Haynes. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Manufactured Housing Institute.
Craig Brock, I'm the Executive Director of Bell Whitley Community Action Agency.
Jennifer Tapper, I'm state representative and also run Operation Care. We have homeless shelters. We're getting ready to double our shelter space, by the way. A medical clinic and food pantries from Shelby County.
Buddy Kittle, representing Mortgage Bankers Association of Kentucky and Stockton Mortgage.
Tracy Jackson, Executive Advisor for the Office of Secretary for Captain for Health and Family Services. And our secretary will be departing August 1st. He's going to retire. And Dr. Stack is going to take over.
And
as
are you
Cabinet
gonna stay?
Secretary. I will be staying, as far as I know.
Ann Price, Executive Director for People's Health, Self-Help Housing.
Bev Merrill from Welcome House in Covington.
Wendy Smith, I'm Deputy Executive Director over Housing Programs here at KHC.
I'm Brian Perry with Kentucky Department of Education, proxy for Commissioner Fletcher.
Cedric Irvin Jr., Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, proxy for Cynthia Fox.
Dee Lloyd, Kentucky Transportation Bureau.
Michael Gardner, Rebound, Director of Housing Production.
Brian Slusher, I'm a political representative for the Central Midwest Carpenters Union.
Christine Espinosa, I'm with the Human Development Institute and work on accessible housing and universal design.
Kelly Reynolds, Kentucky Housing Corporation.
Is anyone here who's not on the committee that's a member of the general public that wish to raise an issue? All right. So next, if everyone could please review the minutes. Back in January, different weather then.
Feels like a long time ago.
And upon review, if I could please have a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
And if you could please say your name.
Dee Lloyd.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion, Tracy Jackson.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Kelly Reynolds, we have a weatherization update.
Like, I get to be on the first one on the agenda today, so I can take more time out, but I'm gonna rush through it to get you out of here on time. That's super exciting, because we need to talk about the weatherization state plan. And then I will take any questions like about federal funding, because that's always people's hot topic right now is what's happening. So weatherization is funded through federal funds. I think we had some presentation, yeah. So we have three funding streams. Let me explain how weatherization is funded. We have three funding streams. The first one is LIHEAP funding. It's from the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. They get that LIHEAP funding from the U.S. Health and Human Services, and they can carve out up to 15% for weatherization activities, which is what they do, and that they give that to us, and we love that money because we can loosen up the restrictions a little bit. We don't have to follow all the DOE rules, and it's just a little bit looser. It helps us meet the DOE restrictions, which I will talk about. Then we have two pots of money from DOE.
What's DOE?
DOE, U.S. Department of Energy, right? So DOE has two pots of money. One, the first tranche of money really came last, but I'm gonna talk about it first, is it's funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law. But as of last month, we are to refer to that not as bill anymore. So you've heard me talk a lot about bill. We cannot refer to it as bill anymore. We are supposed to be referring to it as IIJA money, which was another acronym that was stuck in the bill. So it is IIJA money from now forever, I guess, until it changes again. That was almost $52 million that was awarded to us as a state for weatherization activities. It was awarded for 5 years. We received the money in July 1, 2022. We actually didn't get the money until April 2023. It was supposed to be for 5 years, up in 2027. After the November election, the Department of Energy extended that contract for 2 years, so we actually have the money until 2029, which was super helpful because we were late in getting the money anyway. And they, in the beginning, they only obligated in their financial system 50% of the money, so about 26 million. And so they obligated all of the money, so obligated the full $52 million to us so that we could access all the money. They were trying to be sure they protected it. So we now have access to $52 million. We've spent about 19 million of it, so we have plenty of money left. So it should last us through 2029, which is a good thing. Okay, that's for weatherization activities as well. So that's the second tranche of funding. The third kind of tranche is the DOE formula money. That is the money that has been in process since 1976, when the legislation for weatherization was written. Okay, it's this formula funding. It is usually a 3-year grant. So we are at the end of a grant period. However, we have to put in a state plan every year. So it's a 3-year grant. They give it to us for 3 years. We put it in a state plan every year. When a grant cycle is over, you just start a new grant cycle. Okay? The continuing resolution that was put in place, March, that extended our funding. So we have funding for another year. So we're writing state plans. Those are due May 5th. Which is why I'm here today, because I need you to approve the state plan as the PAC. Okay, so the PAC and HPAC are really the same things. Okay, so it's due May 5th. We need to approve, and really what I will talk about are the major changes. The state plan is the state plan. I try as much as I can keep everything the same, with just things that we have to update. It's easier for the sub-grantees. We have a couple of you in here. It's a whole lot easier to run a program when it doesn't change every year. So we try to keep it as much the same as possible.
And Kelly, before you dig in, could I add that the program's pretty prescriptive. We don't have a ton of discretion, unfortunately. I would love a lot more discretion. And primarily, we work through community action agencies across the state. We are the administrating agency effectively, but they are the implementing to a large extent.
They are the sub-grantees, so they are the ones that are carrying out all of the technical pieces and all of the eligibility pieces. So they take the applications, they go out, they install the weatherization measures. It is highly technical. All of the technical pieces are pretty much prescribed by the Department of Energy. We have very set standards that we have to follow. They all have to get an inspection. They all have to have an energy audit. The energy audit basically tells us what measures we can install. We don't get to go off that and just be like, well, I really thought they needed a new heat pump, so I'm gonna do that. If it doesn't call for it, we can't put it in. Okay, that's kind of how it goes. All right, so this year, they are allowing us to add some budget categories. The reason we are being allowed to do this, we have this very prescriptive, as Wendy said, something called average costs per unit. It was set by Congress in legislation at, I think in 1976, it was like, I don't know, $4,500. That's how much you can spend on a unit. You can't go over that. Okay, it's an average. So some units could go over as long as some units come in under. But they set something in for inflation. So every year you can increase it a little bit. So we're up to $1,000, but an average cost per unit of about $8,300. Okay, if any of you are doing like home repairs in your house, you can't hardly buy insulation for $8,300. So, and we're supposed to insulate, we're supposed to put in new HVAC units, like there's all kinds of things that we can do. So, they have added these budget categories in to try to take the pull off that average cost per unit. So I'll talk a little bit about those. And then we have the benefit that I'm talking about what we're gonna do here, right? We're decreasing our average cost per unit. So, all right, those are the major changes. All right, so for the master file, so Lisa Barron sent a link and said, if anybody wants to go look at the state plan, this is where it is. Okay, so a master file is the actual content of the state plan. It's everything that we say we're gonna do, from application, eligibility. It talks about our training, what our training center does, what the certifications are of our instructors, of our technical staff. It lays all of that out in a nice grand, like 26-page document. Our health and safety plan is another document that we have on that website. That lays out everything we have to do for health and safety. So when we go in and we do an energy audit, we're not just looking at what will reduce your utility bills, we're also looking at what is in this house that we need to put in to make sure the house is safe and habitable. So it's things like smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. We go in, we make sure there's no mold and moisture, so we try to repair leaks. Like, we're trying to make sure it's a safe environment, right? So that's what our health and safety plan talks about. Then we have something called an annual file. That's how much our sub-grantees are gonna get. It's really financial. How much our sub-grantees are gonna get, has a miscellaneous section that talks about the changes that we're making in the state plan. So it's kind of a quick little piece to go to. It's only like 5-6 pages that you can go to and see what those changes are. All right? So those are the highlights. So our master file, what we did, we removed any references to DEI. That was in our application guidelines that were updated about a month and a half ago, that we were to remove Justice 40 language, we were to remove DEI language. So we have done that. We updated our training certifications, not a big deal. Priority point update, this is a really big deal, actually. Our priority points have been set in stone for 20 plus years. When Kentucky Housing got the program in 2009, those priority points were given to us. What is a priority point? When somebody comes in to apply, they get points based on the makeup of their household. So elderly gets points, disabled gets points, and we were giving points for your fuel source. You got 8 points if you had electric. You got 6 points if you had natural gas. The higher your points, the higher you are on a waiting list. So that is how we do our waiting list, okay? So what happens is, if you have 40 points on the waiting list and somebody has 35 points, even though they've been on the waiting list longer, you get served first. So we're taking high priority need. So they got rid of, they told us, so 2 weeks ago, I got an email that we were out of compliance, that we could no longer give points based on fuel source. Now, I don't know why we've been able to do that for 20 years, and we've been through multiple monitorings, in fact, one in August. I suspect that someone's priorities have changed at the Department of Energy, and this was something that they honed in on, so we're taking it out, and we're changing our priority points. The reason this is a big deal is all of our software systems are programmed with those priority points. Our application is set with those priority points. Those priority points also guide that DOE IIJA funding. So we'll have to go back in and fix that state plan as well, and that's got a whole other set of issues. But this is what the new language is, and I just wanted you to see it so you see what we're doing. All right. We can get priority points based on energy burdened. So if I'm paying a lot in utility bills and I don't have that much income, then I can get points on energy burden, which we were already doing as well, but anyway, that's what that looks like. All right.
Question.
Yes.
So you marked out the 6 children too? They marked out some of them?
So this, down here, you get,
Elderly,
this is
disabled.
because, well, that will stay the same. They will get the still 5 points on that.
What about the disabled?
So the way that disabled and elderly works, we were doing, if you were disabled or elderly, so let's say I'm a member of my household, I'm disabled and I'm elderly, I just got 1 point. We have to get 2 points, so that's what that is. So you now get points for being disabled and you get points for elderly. I think that's like duplicate counting, but I'm not gonna argue about it. That's what they told me to do.
Well, it's just gonna prioritize people who are both.
Right,
Right.
who are both,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're saying, Kelly, and it could be when I reformatted this, I messed up what was struck out. You're saying that last sentence, the household with.
Yeah, that will
yeah,
say,
okay.
that stays the
Children.
same. If they have
Okay.
children under 6, they get 5 additional
Mhm.
priority points.
Okay.
Yeah, that's gonna stay the same. So it's really affecting fuel source and it's affecting this elderly disabled piece, which is a little bit easy. That's gonna be a little bit easier to fix than the fuel source. Okay. And that's to keep us in compliance with 10 CFR 440. Again, I don't know why we've been doing this for so many years and now it's like, I don't know. I don't know the history of why it was even like that. I just went with it. All right, so health and safety plan. DOE has a cap on health and safety costs of 15%. So we can only, when we're putting in measures, only 15% can be addressed to health and safety. We make up whatever we need with LIHEAP funding. But we are dipping way into our LIHEAP funding for health and safety. And so we talked with DOE and we decided we probably need to increase our cap on health and safety in the DOE state plan, which is allowed, you just have to defend it, but I have 5 years of data that shows how much we've been spending in LIHEAP versus DOE, so I feel like that's gonna work. So we're gonna increase it to 17%. We may decide next year we need to increase that even more. So that's what's going into our health and safety plan. This duct insulation ceiling, this is something I simply had to add into the state plan because the audit software that DOE gave us for free isn't working correctly. So this is our backup plan. That's all that is. The annual file, so some things to note about the annual file. Kentucky River Foothills has decided that they want to give back their weatherization program and let someone else cover their territory. This is actually not a terrible thing to say. They came to us, we had a plan, we're working on a transition plan. They came to us in plenty of time so that we were able to go ahead and do an application to our network. So we did a kind of a RFP, an OPA, we did application, we got 2 in, we were able to review those and get those all in so we could get it into the public hearing. That has to go to public hearing before we can actually do that. So we have plenty of time to get that done. So I just keep thanking Foothills, thank you for working with me on this. So we're actually transitioning that to KCEOC, that territory, and that's all named in the annual file, right? So that's what you would see if you looked at that, and it has like all the funding for all the sub-grantees. That's where the budget is, and then those optional categories are kind of outlined as part of the changes in the annual file, and those optional categories, again, are intake eligibility. So any sub-grantee that said, hey, we are spending money on applications in intake out of weatherization, they got money in the intake eligibility category. Then we set out some money for energy audits and for QCI. So what that does, when we're doing average cost per unit, program operations is what counts in our average cost per unit. You take your program operations, you divide it by your number of units to get your average. These 3 categories take those costs out of program operations, and those are high costs, takes it out of program operations. So program operations truly is just materials and labor on the job to do the measures. So it makes it a lot better. All right, so that is the weatherization plan that I'm asking you to approve. Are there any questions? I'm trying to be a little bit slower than I normally am so that you get a little bit more context. This state plan looks a lot like if you've ever looked at our consolidated plans for HUD, if you've ever looked at those, this is similar to what this is.
And Kelly, do you need the approval of HPAC or just to note that it was reviewed and presented to HPAC? I just want to make sure.
The new application guidelines do say approval.
Okay, because I think in the past we haven't.
We've just, yeah, correct.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to cross all my Ts and dot all of my Is this year, that I'm doing everything correctly. Are there any questions about the federal funding?
Well, aside from that, in addition to that, I'll also point out, while I give this program the side eye all the time, because it's a very difficult program, it's very persnickety, and that 8,300 or whatever that per unit limit, it's very low and unrealistic, but that number is in legislation, which is why you should never put a fixed number in legislation. It gets crusty really quick. It is probably the most cost-effective way that we lower people's housing costs. And it primarily, almost entirely goes to homeowners. We're beginning to do some multifamily, but up until the last year or so, it has almost entirely gone to low-income homeowners.
Yeah.
So it's a really important way to bring down their monthly costs.
It really is our way to maintain.
Yeah.
And I always say it's really kind of some Band-Aids,
Right.
right? So these are sometimes, even because now we have weatherization ready, so if we have to defer a unit because it's not where we can even put in a measure, let's say it's got a really leaky roof, so you can't put insulation in the attic because it's just gonna get wet, this allows us to replace the roof now. So there are some other things we can do with the funding that really does help homeowners. It's really good.
Kind of homeowner preservation in a way, yeah.
And of course, I like the program, but why, I'm sure y'all have had some discussions with, from a federal standpoint. So why is it that they don't like the program? I mean, that's a big question, I know.
What was the question?
Yeah,
Why do they not like?
Yeah, because I mean, I agree with you.
Oh, you mean the PHC doesn't?
Oh, no.
No,
He
I
needs
mean-
the federal
He needs the
agency.
federal-
Because it seems to have a target on it, right now, kinda?
So Whitehead seems to, weatherization, maybe not as much, but maybe, so I can talk a little bit federally about what's happening, so.
LIHEAP, I understand.
Yeah.
And I do understand the target on it, because we do LIHEAP, and I mean, it's hard to argue that I'm paying your electric bill this year, you're gonna come back again in crisis, I'm probably gonna be paying it again. And that's great for the poor people that we're supposed to be helping to keep them, completely from freezing to death. However, they being the federal people who are reviewing all this cannot see us gaining any ground on that, because not only are we paying it again next year, we're paying it at the increased rate of what the KU just bumped the bill up to.
Right. I feel like you could argue more the LIHEAP ought to go into weatherization.
I agree.
Than,
And that's where I was going with that, but weatherization, like you said, it does help reduce their energy costs year after year. And it seems to me like a program that would, keeps on saving.
It's a more sustainable program,
Yeah.
and something to note is the way the policy is we cannot re-weatherize a unit for 15
Right.
years.
Yeah.
So we really are looking at, and to install a measure, to even pay for it to be installed, it has to pay for its life once in its lifetime. So if we're putting in a new heat pump and it has a 15-year warranty, it has to make money back on a utility bill in its 15 years to pay for it. So there's really some scientific technology pieces to why we install what we install and the way that works. I think that, I don't know that the administration doesn't not like weatherization. I just think that it doesn't have as much support and people just don't know about it. So that's somewhat of what our membership organization is called NASCAS. And so our ED is on the Hill this week just trying to meet with Congress and legislators about what weatherization is and how they should support it. There are a couple bills in Congress right now. There's one in the House. It is a bipartisan bill. It was sponsored by Tonko, but he has some other co-sponsors. I think there's 5 other co-sponsors, some Republicans, some Democrats, to reauthorize weatherization, increase our average cost per unit, and to authorize our weatherization ready funding. So that's good that it's out there. This is probably maybe its 4th year in introducing a bill like this. Sometimes they try to bury it in another bill, but this one is a standalone bill. Then there's another one in the Senate. Reed and Collins dropped it. So again, it's a bipartisan bill, and it does not call for authorization of weatherization. So it's in committee right now. We're trying to get that into the bill while it's in committee. But it is also asking for an increase in average cost per unit and asking for weatherization ready to be authorized. So there is some support, definitely bipartisan support, so I have lots of hope, although hope is not a strategy. I have lots of hope that we could, that something can happen legislatively with that as well. Yeah. Now, on the flip side, we also have the Department of Energy that we found out last week that only 9 of the 32 staff will be staying after, I think, May. They have all taken a deferred resignation package. The 9 that are remaining to try to keep the program going. So we do anticipate our state plans being delayed and being approved. And what that means is for the past, Craig, probably 7-8 years, like everything happens on July 1st, right? You all have your contracts, like I've worked really hard to make sure money keeps flowing, and when we have a revision in the state plan before July 1st, I get on it and they have it back in 24 hours. Okay, that's just how we partnered with DOE, with that reduction of staff, 70% being in the people that review the state plans. It's just, I don't know that we'll get approval by July 1st to keep that money flowing. But we still have our IIJA money, so work can still be done. It's just being done with a different focus on a funding stream.
So you all are the lobbying firm and, has a lot of educating to do, hopefully with DOGE.
NASCAS does, yes. Yeah, and so we are, I sit on the board of NASCAS, so we are looking at, we basically said even if we have to take out a line of credit to hire a lobbyist, then that's what we need to do, so.
So you are seeking a motion?
I'm seeking a motion to approve our state plans so that I can get it in on May 5th.
Is there someone who'd be willing to put that motion on the floor?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second, Logan Haynes.
Any discussion, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Kelly has convinced me to care about this program. We've gone round and round. It's so technical, which is good, but it has made it so kind of inflexible in some ways.
Yeah. I get really nerdy and geeky when we talk about legislation, so I can
She
talk
really
about
cares.
it all day.
How passionate you
She
are.
really
about
cares
it.
about it, yeah.
All right, Wendy, you are up next with federal program changes.
Yeah, so Kelly kind of touched on this, and I have a lot of stuff to share with you all. I thought many of you all work with federal dollars, either some of the same sources that we do or really different ones. I thought we would offer kind of an opportunity for folks to just share what they've experienced over the last couple of months. We last met in January, right? Lots happened since then. I just didn't know if anybody wanted to share anything that they're experiencing with their programs, changes, uncertainty, that kind of stuff. I have plenty to talk about, but I'd love to hear from you all first.
Had a meeting last week with Energy here in the state. We were talking about the home energy rebate, which is $130 million through the Inflation Reduction. Hasn't come through yet, and some other states have gotten theirs approved. It's just been slow going, so they're proceeding forward, with the assumption that that money is going to come through, but they also have their concerns about it as well.
Yeah. Or do you have any explanation for where it is, or what it's saying,
Well, so again, it's that home energy rebate program. It's IRA 50121 and 50122, which is the high efficiency appliance rebate. And so it obviously was approved through the Inflation Reduction Act, but it has not been dispersed yet.
Just know that's what I
Yeah,
need.
here's what I know about that.
Yeah.
Know a little bit. So that was part of the IRA and the IIJA money were paused in an executive order on Inauguration Day. That pause was lifted somewhat, in the last month or so.
Mhm.
So what I know, what has happened with the energy cabinet is they had released enough funding to get a consultant to put their state plan together. So that work continued, their state plan consulting work continued, and I think they had submitted that state plan, but it probably didn't go in until like first week of January. So then all that stuff kind of like got paused, and so maybe the feds were still reviewing them, but I don't know if any of that's gotten approved yet. I haven't checked in on it in a few weeks.
Yeah, they had said similar that, you know, it was paused, but I guess in the last couple of weeks, some states
Yeah.
that had been on hold.
That
had gotten
pause kind of
approval.
got lifted.
That's hopeful.
Yeah.
Are your manufacturers looking to kind of systematically use those rebates to put efficient appliances in?
Yeah, our
homes?
developers, you know, with Kentucky, most of our manufacturers are outside of the state. And, you know, they're not making it a requirement to be inside of the state, but they want to, you know, encourage Kentucky business. So they're gonna focus on likely Kentucky dealers, Kentucky developers. And then there's a requirement to be able to show that those fundings do trickle down to the consumer.
Mhm. So we don't have to weatherize it on the back end. That's great.
Anybody else?
Well, I can share a few things. We've had a lot going on here. Kelly alluded to some of the funding freezes that happened after inauguration. On much of our funding, that was only a freeze for a couple of days where we were locked out of all federal systems. We had construction projects underway, trying to make draws that couldn't make draws. That was very short-lived, scary but short-lived. Kelly's weatherization programs, however, it was really just about a month ago that those funds became unfrozen. And I'm not talking about future allocations, it was money already committed to projects and organizations, and in some cases houses, where a community action agency might have a contractor owed money. And we were in this loop. Kelly's team did a lot of shifting around to try to fund stuff with LIHEAP, because that was still flowing, and try to make that work. So we hobbled through. We have some funds that have been announced that are supposed to come to Kentucky Housing, probably other grantees across the state too, continuum of care funds for homelessness, as well as it's called HUD 811, which is rent assistance for people with disabilities, and some one-time funding to build permanent housing for people who've been homeless called COC Builds. So that's been announced, or we've applied to it, but it's kind of caught in this limbo and we don't know what's happening with it yet. There are signs that some of it's gonna flow, none of it has yet. With a bunch of our programs, probably like many of you, if you use federal dollars, there's just a lot of uncertainty. So we did get the continuing resolution, which keeps us at least pretty much level funded. But if you know what's happened with rent costs and staffing costs, level funding really means a cut. Particularly for our Section 8 voucher program, because rents have escalated so much. In addition, HUD has decided, they do this thing, they call it proration, which really means we're not gonna pay you what it costs to run the program. So instead of getting 100% of our admin funds, we will get 91% of our admin funds. We'll make do, we'll just squeeze and make do, but we are not issuing any new housing choice vouchers because we have been put on a shortfall list and we are projected to not have enough money to even house the folks that we currently house with Section 8 vouchers. What that has also meant is that we have a lot of multifamily development projects that we had committed project-based vouchers to in the future, and we've had to rescind those. We've done a lot of problem solving at KHC to create, with some of our one-time dollars left over from the pandemic, some what we're calling operating reserves to offset the rent assistance that we're not giving to some of those development projects, because they were underwritten and went to the bank based on getting rent assistance, and we're not providing that. We only had to kill, if you will, one project of about 8 where we had to do this kind of problem solving when we used those dollars to help fund the others. So like painful, but we at least saved most of the projects. We are also in a strange place with a number of the executive orders where some of our grant agreements are beginning to include some language related to the executive orders. And some of that language contradicts federal law, fair housing law, a Supreme Court ruling, or our grant agreement. And so we are in this limbo of trying to understand, well, what has primacy over what? Our legal team is currently kind of trying to write some internal guidance for us so that we can then offer external guidance to our partners, because we don't want the work to stop, and we don't want to turn away the dollars, but we also want to be compliant. We're trying to figure out how do we be compliant with direction that can seem pretty contradictory. I mean, the Fair Housing Act is pretty clear, and some of what the language that's being added could put us in contradiction with the Fair Housing Act. So we're trying to wade our way through that to have a path that is compliant all the way around. And wish us luck, because that's not easy to do. And a lot of our partners are really looking to us for clarity. Some of it is tied up in court cases, and so we can't even offer total clarity until some of that gets resolved. It might just be interim. Right now, here's what we understand, and in 6 months that could change. But we're trying to wade through it to give our partners what clarity we can. The staffing reductions are really affecting us. We have had a closing up in northern Kentucky for a multifamily project, and we couldn't close on our bonds because they were also closing on a HUD loan, and there was no one who could sign the document at HUD. They couldn't find anyone, so it had to be postponed. It has happened since, but we're beginning to see stuff like that where we can't get an environmental review approved. We're just not getting action taken. It was already not real timely, to be honest with you, and now it's stretching even longer, or just can't find the person to do the thing. And that is worrisome. Kelly mentioned the reductions in the LIHEAP program. So one of the things that we have done is we went to DC also in March with the National Council for State Housing Agencies, NCSHA. Every state has an organization like KHC. And so we met with fellow states, some members of Congress, but we also met with everybody in our congressional delegation, with the exception of Brett Guthrie's office. They weren't available. But everyone else on the House and the Senate side, we met with their staff. I have included, just for you all, this is what we gave them, along with the report that the Chamber and the Homeowners Association put out about Kentucky's housing supply shortage and the need to get more housing built. I will say, so just to let you all know how those conversations went, almost everybody is aware of the housing supply gap in Kentucky, and many of them got a copy of the Chamber and Homebuilders Association report, remembered it. We made sure they got another copy just because we felt like that's a really good kind of co-credential. Like, it's not just affordable housing types, it's also our economic development folks concerned about it. So that was refreshing. I was really glad to hear that. At the time, so this was in early March, congressional staff were learning when we did about cuts or changes or freezes. They really didn't have a lot of insight to offer. Many of them really refreshingly made clear that if funds had already been allocated by Congress, they expected those funds to flow to programs and projects and that kind of stuff. So, and they offered to help on specific areas, and we did follow up with them on specifics. And many, most of our congregation is of the mind of having smaller government, but many of them recognize that even just cutting staff doesn't reduce the regulatory role of the federal government, and that it can't just be a staff cut, it's also got to be a change in the role and the structure. And so per that, one of the things we have done since those meetings is work with a number of associations that we're part of and on our own to ask for either regulatory relief, and I'll give an example in a second, and or delegation of authority to us instead of a federal agency having that authority. So here's an example. Many of our projects have to get an environmental review, right? And usually the project hires a consultant or they have staff who do it. They get that, it's a lot of work, they get it to us, we review it really thoroughly, maybe send it back for some fixes, comes back to us, and then there's a public comment period, and then we send it to HUD for final review. DLG doesn't have to do this. DLG is allowed to approve at their level environmental reviews. We would like that authority, so that we're not waiting. We already wait a long time for HUD to approve. We would like the authority. It also means we're taking on the risk and the responsibility, but we'd rather have that delegated to mitigate for these staffing cuts and the time. In addition, we've made a lot of recommendations. For instance, when you're using HUD dollars and many other federal dollars, you're not supposed to do anything that could be considered what's called a choice limiting action. You're not supposed to make a choice limiting action before you get your environmental review. One of the things that's a choice limiting action is just buying a piece of property. And many of our nonprofits and our for-profits, getting land is so hard. If you can get it, you want it. And many sellers right now do not want to wait a year or two with just a purchase option. They don't just want the possibility that you're going to buy it. We've asked for a list of regulatory relief. One would be change what counts as a choice limiting action. Take that out, you know. So we're trying to, while I'm not loving what's happening right now and all of the uncertainty, we are trying to at least take the opportunity to hopefully reduce some regulations and or get delegated some roles so that we can keep stuff going. Our list is really long. If anybody's interested, I'll be happy to share it all with you, all of what we've sent to different associations and to Congress. But we're trying to take that approach of, if this is the direction things are going, how do we keep the work going despite, you know, staff reductions, and maybe even streamline some of the processes. And then I will also say, one of the biggest concerns KHC has overall is the level of uncertainty about the federal programs, but then also kind of the federal finance infrastructure for home mortgages, for bonds, and for tax credits that fund multifamily development. All of this, you know, markets don't love uncertainty, right? And so what we are seeing is we do home loans for first-time home buyers, and our rates just keep going all over the place. We're not seeing investors want to buy our bonds which we often use to finance mortgages. They're not wanting to buy our bonds at the pricing we usually get. And we are seeing some of our developers that use low-income housing tax credits, the pricing is going down because they're pricing risk into that tax credit, so they don't want to pay as much for the tax credit. Because there's uncertainty and there's this expectation that federal income tax liabilities might go down even more. And so it's just, there's all of this uncertainty, which is making even our more bank-like operations pretty wobbly right now, which is, it's just worrisome for us. One of our messages to our congressional members was, if you want to make HUD and other agencies more efficient, we have ideas. we have firsthand experience with how inefficient they can be, and we have lots of suggestions about how they could be made more efficient. And if we're given a long runway to plan, we can get ready for almost anything. You know, if you told us you're cutting everything 5% for the next 10 years, equaling a 50% cut, it's not going to be great, but we could plan for it. We're having a hard time knowing what to plan for. And many of you may be in a similar place with your programs or projects. It's just really hard. The uncertainty is a really tough place for us, our staff, and our partners. Yeah.
Any other comments or thoughts? All right.
I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm just, it's what the last quarter's been like at KHC for sure. And I know many of you all or partners you work with are going through some other home builders are probably going through some other variation of this, of just not knowing what our interest rate's going to be, what our mortgage is going to look like, all that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Wendy. So now on to the housing supply gap update.
Yeah, so I'll again reiterate that every one of our congressional delegates, their staff know about the housing supply gap. I was really impressed by that. And I do credit the Chamber and the Home Builders Association for that. I mean, we've been talking about it a lot too, but I think that they've heard it directly from the Chamber and the Home Builders. One of my main updates was to let you all know that starting on Monday, we have a new position at KHC. We're using our discretionary funds to fund, and it's called a Housing Supply Accelerator. We've created it because we've done the housing supply gap analysis. We've done so many presentations and conversations. We've got all this great data. And the upside / challenge to that is so many chambers of commerce, counties, and cities have been coming to us wanting to talk about prospective projects. They're not ready to hire a developer or a consultant yet. They want a little help thinking it through. They want to talk about what data we have. And so a woman by the name of Heather Haregrove, who has been a consultant for a long time, she used to work at KHC forever ago. She's worked with Louisville Metro, but she's been a private consultant for quite a while. She's going to be joining us really just to offer pro bono kind of early assistance. She's not going to see projects through or anything, but before a chamber, an economic development agency, a city or a county is ready to, hire a master developer, a developer, or a consultant, really help them think through. And maybe even create some trainings or templates, like here's a sample RFP, here's a sample development agreement if you want to own the land but engage a builder, things like that, because a lot of our municipal partners and economic development partners want to do more around housing, but they're not sure where to start. So our aim is to offer them a little more of a bridge to getting some work done. Not to do all the work, I want to make that clear. It's going to be interesting to see how we figure out how to set boundaries so that she's not overwhelmed. But we're getting so many asks, and I haven't been able to say yes to everybody who wants some of our time. And so we're trying to add a little bit more of a service to potential partners. The most recent legislative session did pass a few housing-related things, even though it's not a budget session. Logan, I think you all got a win. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, the housing supply gap analysis was certainly a tool that we utilized and talked a lot about. But basically, what our bills, House Bill 160, does, it kind of puts specific qualified manufactured homes on the same playing field as site-built homes. There's a definition of a qualified manufactured home in that it has to be at least 20 feet wide, has to be at least 900 square feet, has to be placed on a permanent foundation, which they all are now. And then the local municipality can create compatibility standards, which they've had that opportunity for a long time, since KRS 100-348 was drafted back in 2001. But what we would see is a municipality say, well, yeah, you can have a manufactured home, but you have to have 10 acres. Or you can have a manufactured home, but you have to have a 512 roof pitch. Okay, what's your requirement for site build? We don't have one, right? And so now they can still create those compatibility standards, from roof pitch to facade material to foundation material, to attached structures like porches and garages. They can still create every bit of that as long as they do the same for site build, which, one of our fastest growing segments of our industry are site built developers. So now we share a lot of the same, members that are coming over, and so they're kind of used to some of this, and so it's been, met more with open arms from a lot of our folks. But it really just places us on that same playing field.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that will go into effect July 1 of 26.
Mm-hmm. Another measure that was passed that we're still trying to understand, and we don't know if we'll have a roll with it or not, but is it's kind of a clarification that industrial revenue bonds in Kentucky could be used for housing development of 48 units or more. I think it's limited to multifamily, but I'm not sure. And that is where a municipality or potentially KHC technically owns the land, but really just kind of in a shell way, and issues bonds, and then that exempts the property from property taxes, just helping to offset the development costs. And ideally then you could get some affordable units out of that. We're still trying to understand that. That's not something we've ever used, but I think it's possibly a good vehicle, whether we use it or just the private market capitalizes on it.
I don't know the name of the House bill, but it had to do with the churches being allowed to be developed.
I think that passed.
That was a Senate bill, right?
Did it not?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Oh, it did not.
I was surprised. Senator Higg didn't sponsor that.
I'll tell you.
What was the measure trying to attempt to?
What it was saying was that if property is owned by a church,
Okay.
it would not, and it was developing, I'm gonna get this number wrong, but it's like 20 or fewer units, I can't remember the number, a small apartment, development, then it wouldn't have to get a zoning change.
Okay.
So it could remain zoned as a church, as religious property.
And you can create housing.
Yes,
without
but it had to
zoning.
be, can't be a huge project. There's a limit to the number of units. It's something like 20, 25 units. It was meant for like, the archdiocese, the Presbyterian church, churches that own some land where they might be willing. It's based on, some call it yes in God's backyard legislation, like instead of not in my backyard, where religious communities might welcome creating some affordable housing. It did have to be affordable, I think either 80 or 100% AMI and below, and not huge scale, so you can't build megaplexes, but it was meant to be a way to.
It was SB 59.
SB 59, did it pass?
No, it did not.
It did not, okay.
It passed in the Senate, didn't get voted in.
Okay, gotcha. I think you could maybe expect that to get reintroduced next session, that's possible. And I wouldn't be surprised, based on the housing task force and everything, it'll be interesting to see what happens next legislative session when it is a budget session. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, y'all had to listen to me for a long time.
Does anyone have any informational items or announcements?
Our pilot project home that we did in the city of Versailles is open, and we do some open houses on the weekends for the next few weeks from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Many of you have been to our Louisville Home Show, which is great for you to kind of see, touch, and feel manufactured housing today, but this gives you a good opportunity of seeing what it actually looks like and feels like when it's placed on that permanent foundation, when it's there, on the land, and it looks like a site built. And so the response from the community has been great just with one weekend of open house so far. Already have like 4 families that want to buy it. There are some restrictions on it. Household income has to be below 120% of AMI, has to be the buyer's primary residence, can't be utilized as rental property, either short-term or long-term. They have to qualify for a mortgage. And then one of the things that is a concern is, where manufactured housing now appreciates at the same rate as site built and doesn't negatively impact surrounding values, there is a concern that you'll have an investor that wants to buy it and flip it, right? Because it will have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of equity on day one at asking price. And so they're doing basically a program where for so many years, if you buy it at $249,000, you can't sell it tomorrow for $315,000 when it appraises for that. So they're going to tie it to the FHFA housing index, where year 1, year 2 increases the same as that housing index. So really neat to see if anybody wants to go by and check it out. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous house. And
When did you say it was?
I'm sorry?
When did you say it was?
So it will be every weekend until May 4th so 26th, 27th, 3rd, and 4th from 1 to 3.
And where is it?
It's on 274 High Street in Versailles.
It's really pretty. I drive by it every day. It looks so nice.
Yeah, it went slower than we thought because the city owned the lot and the neighbor disagreed. And so that paused it for a few months. But,
Why don't you talk about why the city is doing this demonstration?
yeah, so this was a product of a housing task force that the city of Versailles did after walking through a house at the Kentucky League of Cities Conference 2 years ago that we had brought. You know, those of you that know Versailles, you know the kind of reputation of this is the horse farm country, and at one point it may even still have the highest property value per capita in the country. And so it's not the area that you think of when you think of manufactured housing. And so this task force was created with local lenders, local real estate agents, but then just people from the community, teachers, guidance counselors. And, you know, a couple of the members, teachers, stood up and said, hey, we grew up going to Woodford County High School, went off to college, wanted to move back, and we can't afford a house here. And so where we call home, we can't find a home. And so they wanted to do this pilot project to show the citizens of Versailles, and this is prior to House Bill 160, show the citizens of Versailles that this isn't a mobile home anymore. And so the mayor is bought in. She has become our biggest advocate. In fact, she came and testified before the Committee for State and Local Government, for local government at the on the House Legislature. So it's really impactful, and haven't seen or heard anything but positive remarks.
You need to get Google Maps to drive by and take an updated pics.
It seems like it, honestly, it seems like it went on up overnight. Like one time it was a vacant lot, and the next time I'm like,
Well,
so there is a house there all of a sudden.
Yep, so that house was actually the exact house that we had at Kentucky League of Cities conference last fall. And it left Rupp Arena and went to that lot in Versailles. Now it's sat there for a while they figured out the legalities of the land, but it's set up now. And from the time that it was a pile of lumber in the factory to the time that they were moving furniture in on the Rupp Arena loading dock, setting up artwork was 4 days.
We are seeing lots of our members look at manufactured housing or modular. I know you all are working on a modular. Do you want to talk about that, Michael?
Well, yeah.
Or not, it's up to you.
Well, I don't know who needs to hear this, but, yes, so Rebound, we are working with MNY to do a 9-plex condo development down in Russell. They applied for the state Kentucky Industrialized Building System permit back in November, and it was supposed to be like a 6 to 9 week process to get the state permit, and it took 16 weeks. And so we got the permit in March, which allows, my understanding, it allows approves the construction inside the factory, I guess. And so, and then there's a site work permit that the state has to issue, and that was supposed to take 5 working days maximum, and we're still waiting on that. So, I don't know, I don't know who needs to hear that, but.
Well, I think your point, I mean, we're going through, looking kind of test some, it's a new way to get stuff done, right? So it means like our processes, even at KHC, aren't built maybe to, no pun intended, to do this well, and we're learning a lot. Also, we're trying, like some of our staff are like, well, shouldn't this be cheaper? And I'm like, whoa. If we want it to be built just as well as anything else we build, it's not gonna be cheaper, but it will be faster. And we just need more ways to get stuff built. So, but it's just, we're having a lot of that kind of, we're going through those growing pains too.
Yeah.
And Michael, I have met with DHBC on that. You know, they go through a plan review process to get those KIPS approvals. And of course, last week, half of their team was out, period. So they're definitely behind. But we met with them right as MNY was considering Kentucky and said, hey, you guys need to gear up because, you know, one, the industry by itself is increasing. I mean, 2024 was up almost 40% over 2023 for factory built. But with MNY coming on board, you know, need to gear up, and they did not. So hopefully now they're seeing the pressure that we weren't just talking. This is true, and so while they did not gear up fast enough, they have been good about working with us as once we see a permit requests go through, of kind of expediting it as much as possible. So I talked to Robin with MMY this morning, and he's got some other projects that's facing the same thing. So hopefully we'll have, with pressure in DHBC a little bit,
Yeah, we've seen zero price increases, you know, I mean, so they've held their prices, and that's not been impacted. We believe that in Louisville will be the first affordable housing project that they will complete once they actually start. So their timetable, they're still saying to us, you know, end of July, you know, that's all nine,
Yeah.
you know, and it has an elevator, so stay tuned, you know.
I can attest, it's not MMY just giving you hey, this is the issue. It's genuinely the issue.
Yeah.
So you say this will be MMY's first one?
In
Mike?
Louisville, I believe, affordable
Is it?
housing, yeah.
They've done in other states, they're doing one in Sellersburg, Indiana,
Yeah,
a
they're
scholar
doing
house.
a scholar house in
Yeah.
Sellersburg, Indiana.
Is that one done, do you know?
Mm-mm.
No.
It's not done either?
And then they're doing a family scholar house in Louisville as well.
Mm.
They broke ground on that one, that's in Liberty Green, I
Yeah.
think. And the last time I was at their facility, like all the boxes, I call them boxes, they were still sitting there. They hadn't been delivered to Indiana, because Indiana state hadn't approved the site. So they couldn't even transport them, fix them to the site yet, so that was a few weeks ago, I'm not sure, but.
Do you guys do inspections on those then, Linda?
We would do footer,
Yeah.
but none of those have come through our funding yet, MMY, so I don't know yet, I don't know.
They have ours, that's what I'm asking. We can talk about it.
They've got a project with you guys, MMY?
They've got, yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm kind of, and it's different, so I'm just kind of looking for
The process.
process, examples, kind of practices on whatever, kind of how that process, how it's gone for you all. And so, but they have not started yet, but they've come through, yeah.
They're excellent at communication. I mean, I can call them
Yeah.
right now, they pick up the phone and tell me it's not us, we're just waiting on whoever from the state. And,
Yeah. Yeah. I just wonder with it kind of being so different, if it's having issues with getting certain approvals, because, you know, like you talked about, like the boxes still sitting, waiting to go into Indiana. You know, are we gonna run into issues like that, trying to get those into certain locations here in Kentucky possibly? So that's kind of what I was wondering, if you've heard anything on that.
and
So-
what, again, he can talk about it in the meeting. Some of the things he was sharing with me was that, some of the, I don't wanna call it confusion, but they were reviewing, and because it's all steel framing, said that kind of posed to be kind of problematic for the review team at the state level. They had probably never seen modulars all
Yeah.
steel framing, and he said there was a lot of comments and questions, and it would just go back, it was like an endless bevy of questions. And, they believe it was part of just, like I said, it's just a learning curve. And it's the
Hopefully
first
it's,
one they've seen.
once they get over this, then it, you know, can
Opens the
get
floodgates, I
cranking.
hope so.
Let's
Thank you for your service and being first.
Yes, thank you for being the guinea pig.
It's scary, it's scary, and, it's very scary. We're the first, and, the way there's, yeah, I mean, it's just, we wanna do more. We wanna do single family, we have a subdivision we're planning to develop, and all of that's on the table, depending the outcome of how this kind of plays
Right.
out.
We're doing single family, so Mike, we may be your guinea pig then.
Right.
so.
Okay.
Molly, this should be a conference session.
Yeah.
You know, for real, like,
Yeah.
what, how did it go? What were the hiccups? What were the, like, I
Well,
think
but
that's
like
important.
what, you know, like, I don't even know, like, what approvals do they have to go through versus traditional?
Yeah.
You know, traditional units of some, you know, and are there, because, you know, like, kind of what I'm hearing from you, Mike, is when you talk about it, is that I'm not even sure at the state level, they fully
That they're
know
ready
yet
for
how
it.
to treat it, or that they're ready for it. And I think maybe that's part of the issue, which is out of their control. But I'm wondering if we need to then get certain partners involved at that level so that they can prepare for it. You know, I kind of use the same thing with, you know, with the finance cabinet. You know, we've had to get creative with certain agreements in order to, you know, vendor contracts to get money moving through the finance cabinet. And they tell us, well, this is not like, you know, this is not what we normally do. This is not traditional. It's like, Well, it doesn't matter. You've got to figure out a way to make this work
Yeah.
because we've got, this is the money that needs to go out. It needs to go out structured like this. Figure out a way to fit it into your system.
Yeah.
Don't tell us that it's just not going to work or not what you've seen before. And that's kind of what I'm wondering with your process too is, I just want to make sure that we have the right people involved with, well, we're not just getting, this isn't going to work, this is not what we see. Well, we need to find a way to make it work. And what do we need to do or who do we need to get involved to make that happen?
Because you lose some of the value of the speed.
Yeah, right, which is
Right.
which is one of the biggest selling points,
Yeah.
and and what they sold on their product was the speed and the cost and the speed. Well, time adds cost too, and so if it's no longer meeting what was its intended purposes, then I don't know that that's going to really question the success of how those units will be for everybody. So we've got to find a way to try to help make that work. And so anything that you've got that may help us and anything that we have that can help you, we're happy to, have that discussion.
All right, so I'll
It's
put
like
that
we need a
down
support
as
group for modular
July
construction.
agenda topic.
Therapy
for-
session or
You guys
something.
can report back to us.
Kathy's I'm here for Kathy today, and so when Kathy comes back for July, she's not gonna know what hit her, so I just set Kathy up for that one.
Well, and I do think, Travis, to your point, it would be good to get those groups together at
Yeah.
one table because, some of the different organizations, say, yeah, we're gonna inspect footers. Well, you've got one organization inspecting footer, then you have DHBC inspecting the footer.
Yeah.
Then you have, a lender requirement of footer inspection. So, that same exact footer is getting inspected 3 or 4 times in some situations when you have a concrete truck waiting and then it rains. And the
Yes.
footer is filled
Yes.
in at that point.
I
So-
agree. Kate, we ourselves are trying to look at how can we streamline, because we feel like we're part of that issue. We don't want to compromise on quality, but we want to figure out how do we want to kind of take the approach of code plus whatever the dollars require and what will let us sleep at night. Like how do we streamline our own inspection processes? Code used to be so lacking in our view that we had to go above and beyond, but now it's really caught up and we're in a similar place, trying to figure that out.
Well, that's one of the challenges with modular versus HUD code in that the HUD code allows for more of those third-party inspections to take place, either at the factory or throughout that factory building process. Whereas modular, that factory could be in Knoxville or down in Alabama. It's a Kentucky inspector that's inspecting those. So it presents a challenge on modular, whereas HUD code, it's inspected at the factory by a third party and then inspected by a state inspector in Kentucky at the ground level, at installation.
Yeah.
And that's it. So it is streamlined, but they're built in the same factory with the same products. So.
It's really exciting to hear about all of this growth in modular and manufactured housing. So my work is all with accessible housing, and I've done for 20 years, retrofit of housing. Is there much incorporated in terms of the floor plans and also the features towards accessibility and universal design of these solutions?
Yeah, almost all of our manufacturers, when you order it, it's basically a click of a button and it's, an accessible home.
And Kate, we have minimum design
I know,
standards, okay,
yeah.
you're familiar, and they
Yes.
do require certain doorway, hallway widths, so that, and Charles Allgood isn't here today, but he always advocates, like, what does he say, like, anybody can become part of, the disabled,
Yeah.
class of people, no one's exempt from it, and you want people to be able to be a homeowner, and especially in a home ownership unit, but really any unit, and be able to continue to live there if they become disabled,
Right.
or need to move their parent in, or whatever,
Right, yeah. So, yeah, but we also just have such a shortage of accessible
Yes.
housing in our
Yeah.
city.
So our meeting in July is on the 22nd, it's virtual. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion. Haynes.
Haynes, thank you.
We do. It requires a motion before you get to go home.
All in favor, say aye.
John, could you use the second?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, it's okay. And all of our motions are to be used.
Yeah,